So I had a staggering moment this morning because on Facebook it popped up that it is my 7th year anniversary of an event that was actually quite profound in the Middle East. And some of you may even have attended the celebration of entrepreneurship in Dubai, which was really founded by Fadi Ghandour and a good friend of his from Abraj, Arif Naqvi. And when you stop and reflect about 7 years ago, let alone when my book about what happened with the Arab world and startups, which came out 4 years ago, the new edition came out 2 years ago, the change that has happened and the speed that has happened, I think was beyond all of our imaginations overall. I mean, we all talk about Souk and Kareem, but the fact of the matter is much broader than that. There are hundreds or thousands of startups that are not only about quantity, about quality. I mean, when you and I met with these people a few years ago, entrepreneurs were literally talking about, can we do this? And no one's talking about that now at all. It's now like, how do we use blockchain? How do we use AI? How do we use ML? How do we use robotics to solve major problems, not only in the region, but beyond? So it's a massive shift in that. The role of Dubai as a hub and network effect of talent, which has just risen rapidly because of rule of law, has been incredibly profound and changing. The amount of money that is coming into the marketplace is a great indicator of everything I've just described. And I think very excitingly, it's not just about Middle East startups doing for the Middle East only, but folks are asking me now, how can I get to Singapore? How can I get to East Africa? And how can people from East Africa come down to Dubai? And it's a big universal phenomenon, which is incredible, really, to think about. And Fadi, of course, his biography speaks for itself, but you really have been present at the creation of all this. You saw things which I think really nobody saw, not just in the region, but anywhere in the world. And in a way, I'd love to start our conversation just by right-setting us, to really kind of say, what did you see in 2008, 2009, that so many people missed then has become what it is today?
I was just looking, and others weren't. So it was out there for everyone to see. You needed to have the mindset of investing in the startup world, since and maybe because I had invested in Maktub very early on, and Maktub was the company that launched the internet monetization space in the Arab world. It was the company that happened, that did the exit, that became the famous story that it is, and I was their first investor. So maybe that's why people knocked on my door, and I got to see them because they came for a visit, and they knew I was an investor, and I was serious about it, and I was happy to take the risk with it, because the mentality of angel investing, if you know, as you know, is a mentality of betting on so many startups. And so you end up investing in many, many, many companies. So you get that reputation of seeing things that others didn't see. What I did is my door was open, that's all. And if you were looking for money, if you were looking for somebody that was going to do a little bit of mentoring, so I learned that process of mentoring accidentally also, because people came for questions also, for advice, not only for money. And so that reputation came out, but it was just that the door was open, Chris.
Maktub obviously became the thing everyone talked about for years. There was this period where people, in fact, were saying, only thing we're talking about is Maktub, and then something began to change. For you, when did it begin to change, become more than just about Maktub?
So, I'd like to say Aramex, but let's say Maktub now, okay. Look, the Maktub story is like the PayPal Mafia story. So I've repeated that many, many times. So the graduates, when Maktub was sold to Yahoo, I think, I mean, I lost count now. If you do a little bit of research on it, you'll find that at least there are 10 or 15 companies that are doing extremely well today in many areas of the digital space in the Arab world that are graduates of that company, of Maktub. So Souk is the most famous of them all, because I mean Souk is a product of Maktub. It was founded by the founders of Maktub plus Ronnie, and so at the core of the story of the digital transformation in the region is both companies. And then you go into the payment, into the fintech, you go into digital content, you go into anything that you can imagine that is happening in the region today has somebody that had graduated from Maktub in it. So it's it was, if you want, the infrastructure play of the internet space in the Arab world.
And so was it Souk really that became another big turning point, or were there things that you saw gradually coming up to Souk's sale that would have that impact?
No, I think what happened is not Souk really. It's the sale of Maktub to Yahoo. That's when I felt the move from a very slow process of startups suddenly knocking on my door to exponential growth of me not even being able to handle the amount of people that were visiting. And then suddenly, as supply comes in, there's a lot of demand, and then, you know, the nature of supply and demand. You know, lots of people popping up, more money coming in, more people paying attention, and then suddenly the network effects, if you want, so everywhere. And it starts in Jordan, then Lebanon Central Bank says we want to do 331 and have $400 million available. The Arab Spring happens, lots of euphoria in the beginning, but then there was also a crash because of it. So Egypt was affected because Egypt was the most promising, and then it took a step back, and then maybe now it's showing its face again, and we're excited about that because it's such a big market. And then Dubai, the smart city of the region, smart by definition smart. So they see what's happening, they look at the trends, and they move very quickly. And our friends from Bahrain now, if you look at what they're doing, is they're also understanding and appreciating that size matters, meaning if you're small, there's no market, but you're close to big markets. So what do we do so that we are going to take advantage of the markets that are around us by creating some ecosystem building exercises that get people to come and establish their businesses in Bahrain for that. Again, a model that Dubai has caught on. So, and then Saudi Arabia, the biggest market, suddenly says, well, everybody wants to come to my market. Why don't we have our own companies indigenously coming out of Saudi Arabia? Because there are plenty of techies over there. And then everybody knows that it's about the network of the countries across the region and never about one country at the end of the day. So exponential growth across the board.
I want to come back to the geographies in a second, but our sisters and brothers in Silicon Valley almost have a fetish about valuation, and investors should, right? Big matters overall. So people obsess about unicorns. Everyone, are there any unicorns there? And at one point, particularly in developing and rising markets, people can obsess too much on that. Having said that, Souk and Kareem matter, don't they? I mean, this matters.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, Amazon is in the region. I mean, that matters.
They never buy.
They rarely buy. They're doing a little bit more now, but they spent about $700 million. That's a big bet on the region. For those who say the region is only about political disruption, well, there's a company that is based here that says, I'm betting $700 million. There is something else happening in the region. It's a big bet. It even, you know, what bothers me most, but I'm going to be positive today, I promise you, Chris, but is that suddenly Amazon bets on the region, and everyone in the region says, oh, we missed it. It's not there. I mean, this was not Amazon's to take. This was somebody else's to take. This was somebody else's to invest in. This was somebody else to continue to build an independent company like Aramex. It stayed independent for 35 years without being acquired by one of the giants. Souk could have been one, but it required a local backbone that supports it, that invests in it, and keep it the company that it is. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm not too much of a nationalist in that level. So Amazon comes in, ahlan wa sahlan. We have to build businesses that are going to be competing with Amazon. And how difficult is that? But is that a big statement? Is that getting people to say, okay, there is something to be invested in the region? There is a market. You can build companies. Will the local regional community that has the capital finally think that this region is worth investing in because it has the talent, and without building that very patient capital to create and risk capital to create the momentum for even more startups and more failures and more things to build and disrupt across the region. It's suddenly they're paying attention because Souk was sold to Amazon.
And Kareem?
And Kareem is a beautiful story. You heard part of it today. So Kareem is the unicorn of the region. It's going to continue. Unfortunately, Souk was a unicorn for a short period of time. It will become a unicorn because Amazon is going to continue to spend. Amazon is spending $5 to $1 billion. I mean, this is not an acquisition. Yeah. This is a long-term play. And then the growth and the exponential growth of Kareem is mind-boggling. I think it is. I haven't seen anything like it in the region, obviously.
Management team's unbelievable.
It means month-to-month double-digit growth, continuously. 400, 500,000 active captains, they call them. It's changing the way the socio-economic face of Saudi Arabia, let me say. So because of the regulatory the regulator in Saudi Arabia said now people that are doing the Kareem driving have to be Saudis. And then suddenly you have 70, 80,000 Saudis. And then we always thought that Saudis don't actually want to do these jobs. So what happened? Why do we have 80,000 people from Saudi Arabia actually driving people from point A to point B and not thinking that this is a menial job that I don't do? And that's a disruptive process for Kareem, unintended.
Yeah, they're small business owners. They're entrepreneurs.
They think of themselves as micro-entrepreneurs. He works at the hours that he wants, and he doesn't mind. It's his car. He's his own boss. And which gets us to think, what happens when the regulator finally realizes how important it is to open up? How do we change the face? Because, look, the Arab world is facing its biggest challenge and continues to face the same challenge, which is job creation. I mean, there is no, you can talk as much as you want about the political environment in the region, but at the core of the story of development in the Arab world is how do we move into the 21st century and how do we create the skills and the jobs for those skills in the 21st century so that we have the affluence and the well-being of society. And so we need to think, what are the businesses that are popping up today that are the businesses of the future? What sort of jobs do we need for those? And how do we get people to think that these jobs are the jobs that you want to be in anyway? Right?
So to talk a little more about that, if you compare the women who walk into your door now from 3-4 years ago even, how are these entrepreneurs different? Like what do you see that's different in this young person than a few years ago?
I see, because of years of these people are fantastic observers. They know what's happening around them. They're globally connected. The education system doesn't matter really, with all due respect to the institution that we sit in here. And sorry, guys, it does matter one way or another. But the minute you step out outside of the walls of the campus, the world is different than what they're teaching you. Maybe they're trying to change. But the disruption outside the wall is much faster than the disruption inside the wall. So, so these guys are self-learners. They are self-driven. They are initiative takers. They are completely skilled and knowledgeable with the challenge and the problem that they are addressing. And their biggest issue is understanding the complexity of the region and how to scale in it. I mean, this is you're talking about Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley, or the US has it easy, Chris. Yeah. So has it easy meaning our friend Reid Hoffman has a podcast, which I think everyone should listen to, called Masters of Scale. Yeah. All right, so he has not yet for a minute, I've been waiting, I've listened to all his podcasts, discussed the issue of access to market. They don't think about it. They don't think that there is a concept of access to market because they live in the biggest market in the world. You're not worried when you are in Silicon Valley that I'm going to be selling a product in New York and worry what is going to happen to that product. Am I going to cross borders? Is there a different regulatory environment? Am I going to clear customs? What's going to happen when I go to New York? You don't even think about it. And then he did another podcast and said which was the most promising scaling market in the world, and what was the conclusion? China, obviously. Even though we are a 350 million people market, $2 trillion economy, bigger than India's and Russia's economies, and per capita $10,000 to $15,000 income. But then when you have the access and the friction and the amount of problems you have in accessing these markets, in the amount of money and energy you have to spend in actually conquering the geographies of the market, gets you exhausted by the time you actually conquer the market, and then you continuously find new challenges that you face. So markets shrink and grow suddenly. One day you have a market that say is promising, and the other day politicians tell you, well, the market is not accessible anymore. So I'm not going to go into politics now because I need to fly back, but the region is challenged in the way it looks at itself. So it doesn't understand that to create jobs, you need to create open markets. You're never, ever going to create jobs by addressing the issue locally. It is not a local issue. It is, you need to open up markets, the movement of people, goods, and capital. The Europeans decided on that. And look at the Brexit story, Chris. Sorry. Look at Brexit. The Brits want to leave Europe, but they want everything good about Europe in it. So they want to continue to have access to markets. They want to continue, but we don't want the foreigners in the country, okay? Foreigners are no good, but I want to have to access your market, the same regulatory environment for customs, the harmonization of tariff, etc. We all want the good things. We want to travel easily between cities, but we want to close our market for certain things. Imagine that is happening, and they're already confused with that. But for us, we build walls. I haven't seen walls crumbling as fast as the world requires them to do, and that's how you're going to create the unicorns or the successful companies or the startups of the future. Markets.
And I want to come back to markets because you, in particular, are beginning to look not just focused on the Middle East, but other markets which are a 4-hour flight from Dubai and all, which I want to talk a little bit about. But I want to pull a little bit on the string of you and how you're viewing entrepreneurs. You famously said for years that the great theses, I think not just in the Middle East, but in emerging rising markets generally, was to copy, paste, and innovate, which is a tried and true path that you've seen in almost every rising region, including China, by the way, overall. Is that still as true today? Now, with the access to software that everyone has, which is ubiquitous and amazing, but not just the access to software, with the access to the latest technology. At our fingertips now, anyone, anywhere can do something with blockchain. AI is available to anyone. Is that still the model, copy, paste, and innovate? Or how, as you as an investor, has it changed?
Look, when I came up with that statement, it's because I was sick and tired of people telling me, so what's original about the technology companies in the Middle East? Okay, I mean, all right, there's nothing original, okay? But there are technology companies there. I mean, we don't need to always worry that is there innovation in the Arab world and are you copying other technology companies? I mean, that's bull, okay? So copying is okay, pasting in the region is okay, and then what happens in innovating? I spent my life in doing that. I mean, in Aramex, there was nothing innovative about taking a package from point A to point B. This was not even invented by DHL or Federal Express. You had Pony Express, and you had people, and you had pigeons doing that also at a certain time. So, but what you do is how do you actually customize to the needs of the markets that you are in, and that's where innovation happens. Let me give you an example. When Careem launched in the Arab world, they did two things that Uber took years to do because they were customizing locally, and that's why they were able to scale quicker. Here, they understood that the Arab world is a cash market, and they had a cash button. It's very simple. It doesn't take a genius to discover that the guy that sits in the cab does not want to use his credit card. So cash button. And Saudi Arabia is 85% cash. So if you don't have a cash button, you're not going to have people using your car. Innovative. Took 2 years for Uber because Uber is not concerned about the region. Number two, they have a pre-booking button, which means I want the car to come tomorrow 8 in the morning to pick me up and take me to the airport or to take my kids to school. That did not have Uber. So they copied the Uber model, but then they innovated very quickly and differentiated in the region. So that continues to be the same thing. So you have access to global technologies. It's borderless. The digital world, by definition, is borderless. You can access anything you want, but how is it that you're going to accommodate the local needs and the different intricacies of the markets that you are addressing?
So with that, this is a conventional wisdom now, no longer a Silicon Valley thing, but it's actually a China thing, which is that with the good news of everyone having technologies, you can innovate faster, you can innovate cheaper, you can build businesses and scale them easier than ever before, anywhere there is talent, which of course means everywhere. The bad news or the challenge is the platform effect. I mean, there's a reason why the Facebook, Twitter, Snap of pretty much everywhere in the world is Facebook, Twitter, and Snap. And as you think about, now put on your investor hat, when you see someone who pitches you now, how do you think about the protection they can have in growing to something of scale within a market and not be wiped out by something may come from Silicon Valley or progressively from China?
Well, if somebody is going to pitch a social media company, I'm not going to look at it. All right? That's a finished story.
The WeChat of anywhere is done.
Finished story. And if somebody says, I'm going to come up with a chat app, why? Right? Okay, unless you have something extremely innovative that's going to be mind-blowing, I don't see that. But what the companies that we look at when we immediately, the first question that we ask is, how are you going to scale in the region? Again, I'm sorry I go back to markets because that's the issue. What is it that is going to get you to be present across multiple borders? Because that's a question you need to ask. And this is a question, by the way, not only in the Arab world. Africa has 52 countries in it. All right? So when you say Africa, Africa is one heck of a massive continent that is extremely complex to conquer. And so these companies that are going to make it are going to have to understand how do you maneuver around the many, many challenges and hurdles that in these markets. And then once you conquer them, this is your hurdle. Look, when Aramex was being built, again, back to Aramex, when Aramex was being built, our competitive advantage eventually when Federal Express and UPS came is that we were in every single place in the Arab world and understood the craziness of some of the regulations much earlier than all of them, and actually were already in a very, very open market. So when you think Aramex, you think the Arab world without worrying about the geographies. So again, platforms. Right? So whoever is coming in to build a business, I need to feel that they understand that concept of the minute you conquer the geography and you build that platform, then you have built the walls for others that are going to be competing with you.
And what is so interesting is there's shared needs of billions of people that often I think Silicon Valley and China don't fully understand or engage in. And you had a very interesting thing that you just did. You took on out of nowhere the head of JP Morgan about blockchain.
That was accidental. So, I didn't know it was going to go viral.
But I think it's possible there
was a JP Morgan event in Abu Dhabi last week, and I was scared to go.
I don't know how many of you people have seen this on CNBC, but if you haven't, you have to find it. Because one, it's a fantastic interview overall, and it's very substantive about blockchain. But effectively, he took on the older people who are sitting around in big, comfortable institutions and think blockchain's not that big of a deal, or think that Bitcoin's
not only that. So Jamie Dimon comes out and says, the blockchain, Bitcoin is only used by the drug dealers and the smugglers, and only nasty people are going to be using it. And that, how much that affects us. We are already facing, cryptocurrency is facing a global challenge with regulators, because they don't understand it very well and they're scared of it. But when somebody like Jamie Dimon says this is only for drug dealers and criminals, what I have to face, because I'm invested in this space, not in the cryptocurrency itself, but in companies that are blockchain and cryptocurrency based. And so suddenly, they say, oh, okay, if Jamie Dimon says that, then we need to prevent it from happening. So the stifling process in allowing innovation to happen in this space, because suddenly somebody uses his name to stop us from investing or from making companies successful. So my answer to that, when the CNBC guy asked me, and I was surprised, I said Jamie Dimon needs to come down to earth and be a little bit more humble to understand what the heck he's talking about before telling us investors in this space that we are criminals. right?
Bullseye.
So it went, and I said, stop talking about the use cases. Because when the internet came out, some of you are very young to remember, I do. There was a question, what is the internet for? What do we do with it? Why do we need the email? I mean, even when I first, even Aramex, when I first went to a Jordanian bank to sell my services, they said, what do I need an express service to take this letter out and pay you $15, $20 when I can pay only 10 cents on the stamp, right? So there are people that don't have brains fast enough to catch up to understanding that, wait a little bit, it will happen. Appreciate that the world changes very fast with technology, and wait, and then use cases will come up. Don't stifle and make an opinion about something you don't understand. Just say, I don't understand it. And then we know that the internet has many uses, right? Some people even question that you need email.
Yeah, I know.
Email? What's email for? I was
that's
worried
what
about
they're using
email.
WhatsApp.
You know what people would tell me, so we'll just have fun. We'll say, now that email is there, Aramex is going to die, right? Yeah, so we didn't die.
Let's play it out a step further if we could. I have a theory. I wonder what you think about this, which is that some of these new technology, I mean, think about most of the companies and the startups you see here and the ones that you back, they're sitting on massively unique data sets, solving very unique problems that are very big problems across billions of people. That's 2/3 of the leg of the stool of what makes for a great AI company. Blockchain and the ability to end run a lot of cumbersome issues in a leapfrog seem profound. I think some of the great leading enterprises and the newest technology will come from emerging markets and very possibly MENA. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think the more complex the market, the more innovation is going to happen, because growth in population, economic challenges, political challenges are happening, even though it's happening in your country also. So I mean, you're looking more like us nowadays. But
we're not talking politics.
We're not talking politics, but we've rubbed off a little bit on you guys. So
Great.
But so as you go across the countries and find the challenges, I mean, you will have the most innovative people popping up from our part of the world. And even in Silicon Valley today, they're thinking about the complex problems in emerging markets. So they're based in San Francisco, but eventually they have to come. Some of the companies that we've both invested in payments and solving these problems. So again, why these markets are interesting? Because you're gonna leapfrog. I mean, the digital world is so beautiful because it gets you to leapfrog everything that developed markets had to do over the years in building infrastructure, and you're suddenly in the 21st century with doing very little at a much lower cost. I experienced this in Aramex when I was trying to build a tracking and tracing system in the 90s. It was going to be very expensive because everything was around mainframes, and then suddenly the internet pops up, and then the internet is the lowest cost enabler of building a capability without having to worry about legacy systems that you have. So we need to create an environment where people feel that their ambition happens in the country that they were born in.
You have been putting now, and Wamda Capital has been putting now your money where your mouth has been, and this is as you always do. And you've been leaning forward in some amazing technologies. We both love Ola and BitOasis, which is now the largest Bitcoin wallet in emerging markets anywhere.
Let me give you an example of BitOasis. BitOasis, which is a cryptocurrency trading platform, last year had $100,000 worth of trading on the platform per month. Guess how much does it have per month?
I know, so.
Now. So it's $80 million. That's from $100,000 to $80 million. She says if people leave her alone, by the end of 2018, she's going to have more than $2 billion traded on the platform. So something is, I mean, you allow people to work, they're going to create fantastic companies.
So you've been investing in these amazing new capabilities in the very theses you just articulated, but you also have actually begun to look a little bit beyond borders. how are you thinking about this concept which blows my mind, which you all take for granted, but most Americans do not appreciate the magnitude of this. The fact that within a 6-hour flight of Dubai, there are 3 billion people, most of whom are in rising economies, most of whom are in rising adaptation to technology, is an opportunity unprecedented perhaps without history. You've begun to invest, you've looked a little bit in Africa, you've looked at Southeast Asia.
So if you think of the Gulf today, I mean, Dubai or Bahrain for that matter, and any city in the Gulf today, it's closer to South Asia than it is to the Levant. So those people who think that the back offices should be, you should think about Jordan or Lebanon. I mean, yes, but it's 1 hour away to be in Karachi. It's 2 hours away to be in Bombay. So imagine about it's 3-4 hours to be in Nairobi. So you need to think about the surrounding markets and think about 3 billion people, maybe even more than 3 billion people, and that's when you start building. And these countries look and act the same, even though the regulatory environment might be tweaked here and there, but they all copy each other. So if a regulator opens up in one place or creates a problem for you in another place, people will copy them because it's easy. And specifically the big countries. So when Egypt creates regulatory hurdles, the rest of the bureaucrats in the Arab world say, if Egypt did it, then we have to create these hurdles. So you need to go and fight your battles among the big countries so that you tame them, so that the rest copy that taming process, so that we have that open platform of a region. But yes, you need to think about difficult markets, and your brain starts thinking differently than the brain of an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who thinks everything is easy. When you say, when you're based in let's say, I don't know, in Nairobi, and you want to go to the rest of Africa, you automatically understand that complexity of it, and you build for it. From the start, you have built that complexity into your startup.
I'm going to open it to questions in a second, but I'd love to wrap.
That's why we invested in Twiga, which is an agri-tech logistics platform, which is a beautiful platform. It has applications across the region. It's disrupting the way distribution of fruits and vegetables across Nairobi by using very simple technologies, very simple formulas that nobody else before them had thought of it. How do you buy straight from the farmer and deliver straight to the retailer, bypassing all the middle friction between them by having the simple infrastructure app of not smartphone, a regular phone, and M-Pesa, which is the beautiful backbone of the payment system that enables everything in Africa. Copyable. Copy it. You don't need to be, I mean, if they've done it one place, go and copy it and do it in other places.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, and to your earlier point, they're not only thinking about Nigeria, they're thinking about Egypt, they're thinking about Indonesia. I've seen a Latin American version.
Exactly, because I'll tell you, if you go to Nairobi and look at their system and then go to Cairo and see how the distribution of vegetables and fruits happen,
like that.
It's most probably, I'll bet you anything that they look the same.
Yeah. So I'm going to open it up in a second, but I want to wrap, if I could, a little bit more personally, because your life has been kind of an amazing thing in terms of the businesses, you know, like if we did a resume, the business you built is unbelievable, the venture capital portfolio speaks for itself, you're a go-to mentor in many ways, and this is all kind of the boxes you check almost on a resume. But the impact that you've always thought about in business and around business, you have blended in your life certainly since I've known you, but I think since you were in college or younger. And I wonder if you could some folks here probably know about Ruwaad, but I wonder if you could not only talk a moment about Ruwaad, but why you did this when so many other CEOs anywhere in the world aren't having the same mindset.
I don't know. I mean, I have to figure my brain and how it functions sometimes, but I'm a serial entrepreneur, Chris. I mean, everybody knows me for Aramex, but I've done so many failed businesses I'm not going to tell you about. But I've failed several times in so many things. But and my brain thinks action. I read a lot. I'm concerned politically about the challenges of the region, and I've decided and opted to stay in the region, obviously. And so the problem I see, I feel that if I'm not going to do something about it, I'm not going to look at it, because my gut reaction is always, okay, so how do we actually solve it? Right, so in Ruwad, when I keep talking, and I hate talking about something and not doing something about it. So when we keep talking about the challenge of education and youth, okay? Youth is the biggest challenge in the region. So somebody should naturally ask me, so what are you doing about it, Mr. Affluent, successful, whatever? So what do you do? You keep complaining about it, what do you do? So Ruwad is a community-based organization in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and Egypt. All right. The core of it is giving scholarships to university students in return for 4 hours of community work in their own community. So you have to volunteer in your community 4 hours a week and solve a specific problem in your community. These are marginalized communities. Al-Ashwaiyat in Cairo, the East Amman in Amman, in Jordan, and down south in Tafila and other areas, and Tripoli in Lebanon, and Budros in Palestine. So have any of you heard of Budros in Palestine? Where are the Palestinians? Have you heard of Budros? I mean, you know why I ask this question? Because every Palestinian asks, they don't know. You know, Budros is the only village in Palestine that pushed out the wall. It pushed out the wall peacefully. It was the first and only peaceful movement that pushed the Israeli separation wall back from their land into 1948 land, and it was the first time that Israel gave back some of their farms from 1948. Peaceful movement led by women. Yes. So when I went to Budros, I'll just tell them the story of Budros. So Budros is north of Ramallah. So when I first went to Budros, a friend of ours produced a film. That's how I didn't know about Budros, okay, just like you. But then there was a filmmaker who made a film about, you should go and check it out. It's called Budros. It's about how this movement happened peacefully and how it actually became so powerful. So I went to Budros saying, I want to copy what we do with Ruwad in Palestine. So I go to Budros and say, they tell me, well, people in high school fail across the board here. They don't have tawjihi. You know, in Palestine, you have to do a national examination to pass, and then you go to university. Everyone practically fails in Budros. Why? One, because the universities are far away. Number two, they can't afford to go to universities. So my challenge to the mayor of Budros then was, every person that actually passes the exam, I'm going to give him the scholarship. That year, a month after I had visited, most of the kids that were doing the exam actually passed the exam, because suddenly they had that. In return, I asked, you activate the community center so that these kids become activists in their own communities, solving their own challenges and their own problems. So what do we do with that, Chris, to conclude so that we can allow for questions? The whole idea of creating activists by volunteering is you create that initiative and character building in the individual, instead of complaining all the time, you know, the government have forgotten us, we are living on the margins, we don't have a bus station, we don't have a clinic, we don't have a post office, we don't have a police station. How many times, if you go to any marginalized community, they will tell you that. We are suffering, we are forgotten. So the minute you put the initiative into the people of the community and say, if you come together, if you address your challenges, and if you think these challenges are solvable because they are your own, this is your own street, this is your own neighborhood. If the street is dirty, don't wait for a government to send you somebody to clean your street. Can you clean it yourself so that you can say, I have a clean street? So what does that do? That takes you away from the books that you read in universities and are not necessarily always of benefit for you outside of the walls of the university, and you become a responsible citizen owning your future by solving your own micro problems in your own neighborhoods. And life revolves around hyper-local living conditions. It is not what your president does or what your leader does. It is what happens in your immediate neighborhood that makes you to decide, am I well? Am I doing well? Am I living well? And if you feel that you can actually have a say in that, you are going to be a better citizen. And that's the whole idea. How do we create active citizens believing that they control their future themselves? Even though, I mean, this is a bit, I mean, I'm taking it to the next level. Externalities will affect your life, obviously, but you suddenly have somebody that when he goes to a job, he is a person that thinks initiative is so much important. And that's something that you don't necessarily learn in colleges.
Look, I think many of the businesses I've met here and have seen, you're doing just what you're saying in those businesses. You'll be very big and very successful and very remunerative, but I believe this is the impact that you're having. And I would say, in addition to that, as you scale and become successful, I hope you will create your rewards, whatever they are.
And you're more than welcome to come and volunteer at Ruwad. We give 500 to 600 scholarships a semester to people in these areas, and they volunteer 38,000 hours. Imagine the cost and the economic value of volunteering and knowledge distribution among the community itself.